Welcome to set 2 of my Past Notes, Songs and Stories tour, and thank you for the reaction and the response. I'm really sorry about the little glitch at the beginning. It's supposed to cross-post between my Facebook page and Show of Hands Facebook page, but I will get that right tomorrow and hope to be on air at 7:30. I was also aware during watching the set back that there was a lot of product placement going on with my, there's Don Armand and Henry Slade and Cousin Jack now. So I thought I'd balance that out tonight with a Sidmouth Folk Festival plastic mug. And so cheers for that. And also, although Sandra's going to get cross about this, little sip of red wine every now and then. So back to my trips through the categories. This is the most out and out love song I have. It's called You're Mine. It's written about an encounter at Sidmouth Folk Festival. Does that sound familiar to people out there, you folkies? I've been going to Sidmouth since I was about 13, 14. In fact, the first time I ever stayed away from home without permission. I went over and I missed the bus back. I saw Martin Carthy and Dave Swarbrick at the beach store and slept on the beach or up in Alfred's Garden, up at the top there on the cliff. And the sad thing was nobody even noticed my absence when I got back. But I met my wife Claire there and just over 20 years ago, and this song is about that encounter. And live, I was able to get Jamie, the sound engineer, was able to get some seascape in. He had this digital recording of seagulls and waves, and we got it wrong one night, and it sounded like someone was flushing a toilet somewhere. So anyway, this is You're Mine, and it has the little riff, with the changing chords. No mid-riff on this, no mid-late on this one, straight through. 3 verses, 3 choruses. In the sunburned fields, I saw you, and my world spun around. Thought to myself, I am falling. As I walk through the town, I found you at the end of the day. We lay down by the edge of the bay. One breath of the sea, one taste of the brine, and I was yours. Then it came to all of the distance, the days in between. We were falling deep into the spaces of what we say and we mean, full of fear with a price to pay. I close my eyes and I'm in that summer's day. One breath of the sea, one taste of the brine, and I was yours, and you were mine. You're the shore. You brought me round and you revived me. Now I want more of fishes and caves, tumbling down the tide and the waves are throwing us around. One breath of the sea, one taste of the brine, and I was yours. Now I'm caught in the nets, and you're in my ropes and lines entwined, but I'm yours, and you're mine. You're mine. One thing I used to do when I was a kid, before I wrote songs, was to try and put poetry to music. You know, Water de la Mer. Obviously, Charles Causey was a natural. When you think of the Innocent song, some Rudyard Kipling, The Winding Road, or something like that. And it's a moot point as to whether a poem can make a good lyric. Because with a lyric, what do you have? About 3 or 4 minutes to convey meaning, don't you? And poetry is sometimes so complex and so layered that perhaps you miss the point. Phil has a fine instinct for such things. He says, uh-oh, poetry alert. If he thinks things are getting a bit too pretentious, his antenna go out. And I think he's been involved in some Vogon poetry in his career. But sometimes, and I realised this when we did the Centenary album, sometimes if you find the right context for a poem, then it can be really, it really works almost as a piece of music, a piece of art on its own. The poem that I've recited the most over the last 10 years or so is something by William Blake, What is the Price of Experience? I didn't really know what poem this came from, and I said one night, I think it was in Bush Hall, but a chap in the front row was chairman of the William Blake Society, and he knew where it was from. So I used to do this at the end of The Flood with Martin and with Tom, and I think it's an amazing, very apt piece of poetry. And this instrument, the quattro, I'm going to do a whole lesson on the quattro, a whole little tutorial. It has, I think, a lovely sort of setting for a poem. So what I'll do is I'm going to recite these words of William Blake and just put some gentle chords behind it. What is the price of experience? Do men buy it for a song, or wisdom for a dance in the street? No, it's brought with the price of all a man hath, his house, his wife, his children. Wisdom is sold in the desolate marketplace where none come to buy, and in the withered field where the farmer ploughs for bread in vain. It's an easy thing to triumph in the summer sun and in the vintage, and to sing on the wagon loaded with corn. It's an easy thing to talk of patience to the afflicted, to speak the laws of prudence to the houseless wanderer, to listen to the hungry ravens cry in wintry season, when the red blood is full of wine and the marrow of lambs. It's an easy thing to laugh at wrathful elements, to hear a dog howl at the wintry door, and the ox in the slaughterhouse moan, to see a God on every wind and a blessing on every blast, to hear sounds of love in the thunderstorm that destroys our enemy's house, to rejoice in the blight that covers his field and the sickness that cuts off his children, while our olive and vines sing and laugh round our door, and our children bring fruits and flowers. Then the dollar and the groan are quite forgotten, and the poor in prison, and the captive in chains, and the slave grinding at the mill, and the soldier in the field where the shattered bone has laid him groaning among the happier dead. It's an easy thing to triumph in the tents of prosperity. Thus will I sing and thus rejoice. But it's not so for me. Oh, I enjoyed that. I think the most incredible piece of poetry that I know that became a song is something by Jacques Brel. I don't know who translated this song, La Colombe, the Dove. It's amazing. It's got that very European feel. You can see the soldiers at the station waiting to be taken to the front line. Jacques Brel, we supported the sensational Alex Harvey band once when I was in a rock band in London, and he did the most extraordinary song called Next by Jacques Brel, about a girl working in a brothel near the front line. And Bowie's My Death, if ever you get a chance to listen to My Death, which he was the last song he ever played as Ziggy Stardust, and the audience killed him off. It was like a Spartacus moment. Behind the door, there is, and they all shouted me, and he said farewell as that persona. So Jacques Brel is extraordinary, complex and multi-layered. And I'll just give you a little piece of this song. I might go from speaking to singing. It's got an interior rhyme and an exterior rhyme as well. It's why all the bugles cry, the squads of young men drilled to kill or to be killed stood waiting by the train. Why the orders loud and hoarse, why the engines groaning cough as it strains to drag us off into a holocaust. Why crowds who sing and cry and shout and fling us flowers and change their rights for ours, to murder and to die. The dove has torn her wings, so no more songs of love. We are not here to sing, we're here to kill the dove. Why must this moment come when childhood has to die and hope shrinks to a sigh and speech into a drum? Why are they pale and still, young boys trained overnight, conscripts paid to kill and dressed in grey to fight? This rain cloud's massing tide, this trainload battle bound, this moving burial ground thunders through the night. The dove has torn her wings, so no more songs of love. We are not here to sing, we're here to kill the dove. And why your face undone, with jagged lines of tears that brought in these first years all the peace I'd ever want. Your body in the noon, the platform fading back, your shadow on the track, a flower upon a tomb. And why these days ahead, when I must let you cry and live prepared to die, as if our love was dead. The dove has torn her wings, so no more songs of love. We are not here to sing, we're here to kill the dove. Isn't that amazing? That Jacques Brel, the dove. So, as I have the quattro to hand, I thought I would plunder another of my categories of inspiration, and that is the traditional folk tale, and in this case, Widdicombe Fair. And there's a whole story that goes with this song. I had a chord sequence on the quattro, just to... I think that's an E minor to a... I don't know, I'll have to wait till the quattro lesson. So I used to play this along to a little echo that I had on my acoustic guitar amp. So and the chords used to overlap, and I was very fond of this little sequence. And then in the early noughties, it must be about 202, 203, I saw this West Country feature, and as far as I remember, it was a Devonshire clergyman who'd rewritten Widdicombe Fair. So far from being the jolly Tom Pierce, lend me a grey mare, it became this brutal stag night out with these guys who pick upon this girl, and the mare is their victim, and the old mare died. You can imagine how dark. It's like an old folk song written by Quentin Tarantino, very, very dark, and it really appealed to me. And I tried to contact the guy in question. This is pre-Google, and I couldn't raise him, and so I thought, I started writing the song. I only had about 2 complete verses and then a lot of fragments. And then when we were recording Cold Frontier, or Code Frontier as they say down here, they don't pronounce the L's in East Devon, they got taken by the Bristolians, so Code Frontier. We were recording Cold Frontier, and we had about 3 hours left, and Mick Dolan, who was producing, said, look, is there anything you've got, just anything random we can just whack down before we close the session? And I said, well, I've got this chord sequence, and I've got sort of 2 complete verses, but the rest is all fragmentary. So I put down the sequence, and he said, well, I'll tell you what, you play it for about 3 minutes, and when we're up to 3 minutes, I'll put my thumbs up, and then you stop playing. So we recorded that sequence, and I did about 3 minutes of it, and Mick said, and stopped. Then he said, well, why don't you just sing along what you've got? And so I picked up the bits of paper, and it was early dawn, da da da, and then it loses structure completely. The first 2 verses are pretty much coherent. Then I was picking up bits of paper. He called, he cried, God knows I tried. And then when it got to the end, I did all along, down along, out along the lea, just as the tape finished. And Mick said, that's great. He's from Brummie. He said, that's great. He said, that sounds great. And I said, Mick, I don't know what happened. He said, no, it works. He said, we'll put it on the album. And I then had to learn what we'd recorded, because I'd never sung it in public, and there was no coherent structure. And people come up to me now and say, oh, I know what happened when the barman sees the girl, because he ends up with that bloke's watch. I said, I don't know, I haven't got a bloody clue. You know, so it was like hidden meaning in this song. Widdicombe Fair. The other story about Widdicombe Fair that's quite funny is that we decided to start one of the Royal Albert Hall concerts with it, and we decided this quite late in the day, and I said to Phil, why don't we go around the outside, and I'll come down one line of steps and walk through the auditorium, and you can come down and play the fiddle. A good idea, but nobody had told the ushers. So when we went round the outer concourse, everyone was sitting there waiting for the lights to go down. They wouldn't let us in. She said, you can't go in till the concert starts. And I said, well, it's not going to start. You know, she said, you can't go in till there's applause. And then I said, look, that's me on the poster. So she let me in, and I stood there on the top of the stairs, and someone went, sit down, it's just about to start. And anyway, bizarre. So this is Widdicombe Fair. As I say, structureless. Goes like this. It was early dawn when we met out on the hillside, on our way to Widdicombe Fair, to drink ourselves, try and make a big noise there. 6 Devon lads and a younger boy, whose mother said, promise me now you'll watch for him. He's never slept out of home before, and you know too well there'll be trouble in store. I gave him my word and we crossed the moor. It was growing dark. We stopped at the inn when we saw her, fair-faced in the candlelight, such a fine sight with her long black hair. Young Billy stared and she stared right back, but the landlord said, she's spoken for. So Billy said, leave me here alone, I'll meet you tomorrow on your way back home at the crossways. At noon on the Whitton Down Road, you go and I'll I'll stay. He said, you lads go and I'll stay. I said, take my watch and my chain. We all hit the road again. 4 miles to the fairground. We had a fine time there. Next day came. We waited in the rain at the crossroads, but the boy never came. I said, you go home, and I returned to the inn where the landlord said the last he'd seen was a boy and a girl out on the moor. That was all he knew, and he showed me the door. I called, I cried, God knows I tried, till the long night came. His mother flew at me, scratched my face. She called me names, said I was to blame, and asked would she ever see her sweet young son again. Well, a year went by without one sign. I went back to that inn to see what I'd find, but the wind was so cold on the moor that night. Thought I saw a couple in the pale moonlight, and the landlord said, why are you back here again? And from his pocket hung down my watch and chain. Thomas sat down on a stone and I cried, knowing full well that the young lad died. Tom lent me a grey mare. We're all going back to that inn on the road to Whitcomb Fair. So get Bill and Jan and Peter and Dan, Harry and Pete out on the moors we'll meet. All along, down along, out along the, all along, down along, out along the. I wonder if you are you clapping at home? It's interesting, isn't it? It's odd to sing to no applause. It's like the early days of playing in pubs. So moving on, my commission. Quite pleased with this song. It's called Swift and Bowed. Swift and Bowed. So here's the story for Swift and Bowed. For years I had been walking, cycling and driving by the great red brick wall that is Wyvern Barracks as you go into Exeter. And behind that red brick wall, I didn't know then but I know now, is a classic military parade ground as designed by Sir John Moore, the father of the British Army during the Napoleonic Wars. It has the classic parade ground, it has the officers' mess, it has the clock tower, it has the barracks down either side. It is absolutely classic. It was also originally home to the Devonshire Regiment and then the Dorset Regiment, and now it's home to 6th Rifles, who are an amalgamation of the Royal Green Jackets, the Devon and Dorsets, I think the Worcesters and the Gloucesters, I'm not quite sure. But all of those names sort of meant something to me. My late stepbrother was Company Sergeant Major, RSM, Regimental Sergeant Major in the Royal Green Jackets. And I remember well his green beret with the bugle hanging on it. And Den was very much the sort of Knightley family enforcer. Really, he was the shadow, if anything was to befall us. He was there in the background, 10 years older than me, and I looked up to him a great deal. He was a brawler, he was a street fighter, but he was a proud Royal Green Jacket, and as I say, I remember the cap badge very, very well. So my grandfather also was in the Dorset Regiment as a sergeant, and then in the Devonshire Regiment. So all these connections, and Phil's father was in the Devonshires as well. So there were lots of family connections to that building, but now it's the home of 6th Rifles, as I said. And I got an email from the commanding officer last year, Lieutenant Colonel John Penhalley, and he said, Steve, we are having an open day called Behind the Red Brick Wall. And we're throwing open the barracks to the people of Exeter and lots of dignitaries, and we're having a big ceremony and 3 nights of performance. and would show of hands like to contribute something. He said there's no money in it, but you can have a fine night at the officers' mess. And Phil was game for it, and Miranda was game for it, and so were the wonderful Lost Sound Choir from Dartmoor. And they'd had amazing production facilities. They had a big bandstand, they had raked seating, and then they had the open parade ground. They had the whole band of the Rifles, which is a majestic sight to see. And they had Fitz, a well-known local celebrity. He was doing the narration of the history of the Rifles, and it was a real 3 nights of great celebration. And I said to the CEO, I said, "Would you like me to write a song?" And he said, "Well, I'd be absolutely delighted." So I did a bit of Googling, and this is co-written Knightley Google. Now the motto of the Green Jackets was "Celer et audax, swift and bold." And it was apparently awarded to the infantry by General Wolfe at the Battle of Quebec, because the Green Jackets march in double time, as do the Rifles to this day. And so I thought, swift and bold, that's a Celer et audax, swift and bold. So I found out various bits of poetry about the regiment, some phrases like the Kings of Basra, which was a headline. Helmand, the Panther's Claw was one that particularly distinguished themselves, I think, in Afghanistan. And Waterloo, obviously, I've got a bit of All the Hill and All the Main in it from Sharp's Rifles. And a very moving thing I found, the Devonshire Regiment, I think the 6th, and I believe that was the regiment my grandfather ended up in. They were engaged in a place called Mamet's Copse on the front in the Great War. And so many of the men fell that the cemetery still says to this day, the Devonshires held this trench and they hold it still. So I managed to get that expression in as well. So I put the song together, and the bandmaster taught it to the whole marching band, which was an extraordinary thing. You know, it's part of their repertoire now. So you're talking about how these songs are born and how they get written. So as I say, this is now part of the Rifles canon, and we played it every night. And on the final night that we played it, I introduced the song, and we were just about to perform, and the choir was ready. And all of a sudden, I was aware that there were 2 people on stage that I hadn't expected. And this is like our space. This is our environment. You know, we're quite conscious of movement on it. And it was the CEO in full dress uniform and his adjutant. And he gently pushed me to one side. And he said, "In my capacity as commanding officer, I can make certain discretionary awards. And I would like to present Steve Knightley with his regimental beret and award him the title of Honorary Rifleman." And the adjutant came up to me and he gave me my beret, he put it on properly, and he gave me a formal salute and said, "Welcome to the regiment." And I was quite touched, you know, I was very moved. And the 6th Rifles also sent a bugler to play the last post at my stepbrother's funeral. And so all those connections seemed to come home at that moment. So now I've got my own beret. I've been to some extraordinary piss-ups at the officers' mess, particularly the one in Dorchester. I haven't been given a sidearm or a weapon yet, but it's early days. So what I want from you lot, and this is like, I'm not sure how this is going to work, I want you to sing the chorus, okay? It's a call and response song. I sing, 100 years behind the red brick wall. You sing, Celer et audax, swift and bold. Try that. Celer et audax, swift and bold. Then I sing another bit. Here's to the health of bold John Moore. And then you sing, Celer et audax, swift and bold. So it goes dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Can you nudge him next door, because he's nodding off, you know. This is a community singing bit, and I shall fuel myself with some red wine. Sorry, Sandra. Swift and bold. 200 years behind the red brick wall. Let's drink to the health of bold John Moore. Celer et audax, swift and bold. From Waterloo to the Panther's Claw. Celer et audax, swift and bold. From bugle rattle and the bugles call. Generate Dowdex, swift and bold, swift and bold, swift and bold. The heart is steady and the line will hold. Histories are written and tales are told. Generate Dowdex. Not bad. You can do a bit better. Ah, the kings of Basra wore their crowns. Generate Dowdex, swift and bold. The Howman's barren and broken ground. Generate Dowdex, swift and bold. O'er the hills and o'er the main. Through Flanders, Portugal and Spain. Generate Dowdex, swift and bold. Swift and bold, swift and bold. The heart is steady and the line will hold. Histories are written and tales are told. Generate Dowdex, swift and bold. Lads from Devonshire's rolling hills. They held this trench and they hold it still. Generate Dowdex, swift and bold. 100 years behind the red brick wall. Generate Dowdex, swift. We'll drink to the health of bold John Moore. Generate Dowdex, swift and bold, swift and bold, swift and bold. The heart is steady and the line will hold. Histories are written and tales are told. Generate Dowdex, swift and bold, swift and steady. Histories are written and tales are told. Generate Dowdex, swift and bold. Histories are written and tales are told. Generate Dowdex, swift and bold. Oh. Did you sing? I hope so. So, continuing my journey, here's a story that I turned into a song. An extraordinary story, really. It was first told to me probably in about 1968. It concerns a friend of mine called Dave Curley. And if you go, he's an Exmouth boy, fisherman, a very tall, striking looking guy. If ever you get the chance to see the original Country Life video, which was recorded in a barn at Dart's Farm, Dave is the guy with the long blonde hair faking playing the bass. With Matt Clifford, Roy Dobbs and Gareth and me and Phil. We're like a American sort of rootsy band, and Dave is playing the bass or doing a very good imitation of. So Dave told me a story of something that happened to him when he was diving for scallops between Exmouth and Teignmouth. And the estuary, I suppose, about 6 miles wide, 6 miles wide at that point. And his dad was in the boat above, and he was down 80, 90 feet, something like that. He said it's very murky, very, you got to get the tide right. And but in those days, they were very productive, the scallop beds, and he would come up with maybe half a dozen nets. And he said one day in November, late afternoon, he was down, and when he surfaced, it was dark and starting to rain, and his dad's boat wasn't there. And I think what had happened, the surface marker buoy that showed his position had drifted, and so every time come untied and drifted. So when his dad looked at the buoy, he assumed he was in the same spot, but he drifted closer to Dawlish. So Dave emerges 2 miles offshore. No way he could make it to shore, laden down with nets and weights, and there's no dad there. So how they must have felt at that time, who knows. And in a way the song is quite quite predictive, because neither of us had kids at the time, and now we've got 3. It says I've got 2 kids of my own and 1 on the way. And so the song originally was just about a father and son working together in what is obviously a very dangerous occupation, fishing. And then through various family circumstances, it became about being there for people when they surface from a dark place. And so the song sort of gained another chapter with personal history. So I'll play you the dive. It goes like this. One November's noon, we left the docks, heading southwest from Morecambe Rocks. My dad and me, our 9 to 5. He used to steer and I used to dive. So over the side I slowly went down, 100 below, to where the sea water's brown. But after an hour I got low on air. When I surfaced again, his boat wasn't there. My marker boy must have come untied and drifted away with his boat at its side. He looked at his watch, 3 miles to the south, and he turned back again, his heart in his mouth. Soft rain on my face, the sun almost set. I cut loose the weights and I let fall the nets. The lights on the shore were shining bright and clear. The cold was drifting in and there was nobody near. Nobody near. Was there ever a reel, a rod or a line, so strong and true, so straight or so fine, as the tie that wound in through time and space, till he came out the darkness, right to that place. Now we don't talk much about those days. Got 2 kids of my own now, with one on the way. But if they're to grow and if they're to thrive, one day they'll go and one day they'll dive. But when they come up for light and for air, I hope someone's close, I hope someone's there. There's another story Dave told me, which will make a song one day. About 8 years ago, a little trawler from Exmouth went down, just off Brixham, and the skipper was trapped in the cabin and couldn't escape, and the crew managed to get free, but it was so deep and the tides were so treacherous that the Coast Guard said that no one was allowed to go down to recover the body of their friend, and they created an exclusion zone around the ship. So Dave and some friends incredibly organised a dive, probably illegally, and when there was no one around, no Coast Guard and no watch, went down. One of them watched the tide, and another shone a torch, and another went through to the cabin and recovered their friend so they could take him back to Exmouth and there could be a funeral and the affairs could be settled. Otherwise, for 7 years there'd be no closure on this thing, you know. And I thought, what an amazing story that is of bravery, just working men off our coastline every day. Things like that are going on, you know. And every day at the moment things like that are going on as well. So if there's one thing that's come out of this whole thing, it's the courage and the nobility and the self-sacrifice of ordinary working people. Who would have thought that truck drivers, lorry drivers and shelf stackers would become heroes, you know, let alone people working in the NHS, you know. Let's never undervalue them again, for all our sakes. It's November noon, we're leaving the docks, my son and me, we're just off Morecambe Rocks. Let's dive, you must break free and let go to grow. Let's dive. So, we come to almost to the end of our journey of influences, and sometimes there's nothing like the mindless bash. So I'll rephrase that. When Phil and I used to play together, sometimes he'd look at me and go, you know, let's lift it. Too many lyrics, too much content, you know, and we'd play a tune, or typically we'd do something bluesy, something formulaic, something bluegrassy, you know, something to give people a bit of a respite from the endless lyrical content. And we also used to do, you know, Kilgarry Mountain and Black Velvet Band, and anything by the Dubliners or the Pogues would always go down well, particularly in the pubs. And so we had a whole fund of Irish folk songs. And the great thing about those songs that they weren't born in the concert hall, they were born in the bar and in the community and in public gatherings. So they work, you know. So after years and years of playing Kilgarry Bloody Mountain, as I was going over the Cork and Kerry Mountain, all that sort of stuff, I thought I would write my own folk song. So I gathered up my information about Cheltenham and the Gold Cup. I knew a bit about Cheltenham, having lived there for a while, and the Irish invasion. So I wrote a song, and then Phil put a reel at the end, so it gets faster and faster at the end when we do it full speed. And after about 8 years, I found it on websites of Irish traditional folk songs, which is incredible. And it's good for the soul, but certainly not for the wallet. But there it was on Irish folk songs. And about 6 years ago, I got invited to play this with my favourite Irish band, Dervish, led by the redoubtable Cathy Jordan. They'd learnt the Galway Farmer, and they were playing a special celebration anniversary concert at the Celtic Connections. So they flew me up to Glasgow, and they had learnt the whole song, including the reel, and they were going to play it at breakneck speed. And Cathy and I were going to share the choruses, and so we were at the fruit market, you know. I think Andy Irvine was there, who I found out, didn't realise this, is my wife's cousin. Found that out after we first met. One of my heroes. Anyway, we were playing the Galway Farmer, and the boys were kicking off on the bazookies and the button accordion and the fiddles. Tommy was playing the fiddle, and Cathy was playing the bowron, and I was playing it on the quattro, you know, because I can get a sort of... I was bashing it away on the quattro, and Cathy was playing it on the bowron, but she was about 6 feet away from me, further on downstage. And as it got faster and faster, and I was in the middle of this amazing sound, she was shouting and screaming stuff, you know, and really getting into the song. And I wandered downstage towards her and playing the quattro, and she said, will you get on there, you feckin' horse, get on there and win, you feckin'. And she was cursing and swearing, and she was so immersed in the song. I thought, this is great, this is exactly what I have always wanted this song to be. And it was wonderful last year to play it with Cormac, because Cormac gave me the permission to ham it up a bit, you know, because people are a bit worried about stereotypes, and we used to sort of rib him, and he gives as good as he gets. He said, Phil, you'll be looking like a big pint of Guinness. So he plays into stereotypes, and we sort of did the same thing back. He said, Steve, you got to get into character a bit more. And he gave me some pronunciation. He said, it's dis, dat, dos and d's. And so he said, dis, dat, dos and d's. And it's Cheltenham Town, it's like film, you know. So, all right. So I have official permission to ham this up. I did accents earlier on the first set. So I'll ham this one up a bit. And then I'll play you one more song. But make that the encore, okay? So what I'll do, after this song, I'm going to get up and go over there for about 30 seconds, and then I'll come back and I'll play you an encore. So thanks again for tuning in. I made a recording of the Past Notes album. All these songs, you can download them from the Show of Hands site. Hats off to Vicky and Amanda for trying to rearrange everything, and who knows how the festival season will unfold. We are still hoping for the best, but who knows. So I'll finish up with this one, and then I'll play an encore, which is a bit odd, isn't it, when you think about it? It's like you go to work and someone says, you've done well, you can stay a bit longer. Anyway, so. How you will, didn't dee. I work my days on a Galway farm in the sun and rain, wind and storm. But once a year I'll chance my arm and cross the sea to England. I'll scrimp and save £2,000 to spend the week in Cheltenham Town. But the racing over, always down, I come back poor from England. I dreamed one night before I left, a coal-black mare with a white star crest, crossed the line and beat the rest, and I came back rich to Galway. Rose at dawn, drove all day, thinking, wondering all the way, Lady Luck, if you come to stay, or steal away my morning. And when I got to Cheltenham Town, Irish faces all around, no bed, no mattress to be found, so I slept on the hillside, spent 3 days at the viewing ring, and saw the horses they led in. Just when I was giving in, I stood and stared in wonder, with stamping hooves and steaming breath, a coal-black mare with a white star crest. I ran my finger down the list, matched the name and number. Lady Luck had come halfway, the horse's name was Galway Bay. 20 to 1 the odds that day, I went to make my wager. I counted out £2,000, held it high and slapped it down. The bookie smiled and he made no sound, but I knew what he was thinking. I was the biggest loser in the land. With a pounding heart, shaking hand, I made my way up to the stand, and the horses came to order. Well, at the first she nearly fell, I cursed my farmer's luck to hell. Second and third she took quite well, but away behind the leaders. Then moving sweetly from the back, she found the rails and caught the pack. 10 to go, and from the track the hooves are drumming thunder. She's catching horses one by one, bridle flashing in the sun. 8 to go, a mile to run, 2 were up before her. On the straight and down they sped, left one at the last for dead, caught the next and by a head. She came home the winner. So I came back to my Galway farm, a wiser and a richer man. Never again will I chance my arm, or cross the sea to England. 'Cause Lady Luck was mine that day, I kissed her mouth and I went my way. Will you raise a glass to Galway Bay and the dreams of a Galway farmer? I've won. Thank you very much. Oh, you're very kind. That was most unexpected. Cheers. So, on the last 3 nights of the tour, the last night was in Colchester, just over 2 weeks ago yesterday, and I wasn't sure when we arrived whether the show was going to go ahead because they were just starting the lockdown. But for the previous 2 nights in Norwich, I finished with this song, which is like a rearrangement of a song called You'll Get By. And I think it was in Southwold I did it first, and the reaction was quite palpable, really. It was quite emotional. And you only realise sometimes when you're singing a song that the content has great, the lyrics have got more relevance than you thought. You know, you decide to sing a song impromptu and you realise it's connecting. So this is, just clear my throat. This is a song called You'll Get By. And one thing that my wife Claire is saying to me, it's not just the people who are currently going down with the virus, it's all the people who are missing out screenings and scheduled operations, and all the people who are equally as worried about their own personal situations. And I can't play this song without dedicating it to Miranda and Dan and to Wilf, because even before this kicked off, you know, imagine how they felt. So this is a special song for me, and I think for Miranda as well, so I'll dedicate it to them, but especially also to you lot as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. I've got 2 more shows from the last 3 years that I can do over the next few weeks. I have my Day in the Life show, and I've also got my musical journey. So maybe next Tuesday and Wednesday I'll do the same thing for another show. Let's just see how things unfold. So you build a life together, and it's shattered to the core. Once again you're gathering up the pieces. The ship has come untethered, drifting free once more, and the ever-raging storm never ceases. Summon up your strength and lean upon the oar. I'll send you a dove, now strike out for the shore. You'll get by, you always do. For the wind that shakes the barley never touches you. Come on, sister, brother, don't you cry. You don't know it now, but you'll get by. Your best is not accepted, your cries for help unheard, while all around unkindness gets rewarded. All your hopes and plans rejected, and you're forced to join the herd, while cynical indifference is applauded. You have walked this road before, you can walk it once again. Why should it break you now? 'Cause it didn't break you then. You'll get by, you always do. For the wind that shakes the barley never touches you. Come on, sister, brother, don't you cry. You don't know it now, but you'll get by. You are bruised but unbroken, you are bloodied but unbound, unsteady on your feet but still standing. It's not the fame or the fortune or the rapture of the crowd when when you're fighting for respect and understanding. Oh, castle walls are falling and thieves are at the gate to take away our rights and our choices. False prophets are calling, singing out hymns of hate, silencing the land with siren voices. Ah, but the bully and the braggart, let's drag them from their thrones. We don't need those savage songs, 'cause we're loud enough alone. You'll get by, you always do. For the wind that shakes the barley never touches you. Come on, sister, brother, don't you cry. You don't know it now. You don't know it now. You don't know it now. You'll get by. Stay safe.